Hello, my name is Mark Hartwig, and today I want to share with you how a biblical worldview has deeply shapes my understanding of law, pardon, law and economics. I really wanted to challenge myself um, with this final, um, considering my major is a biblical studies major, and I was like, well, how a I guess a simple or a cliche direction to go would be, you know, um, sociology or psychology. Um, but I really wanted to kind of like dive into law and more at a kind of an international scale, broader scale, uh, as well as economics. Um, as a biblical studies major, I do believe that God's justice and provision offer a redemptive foundation for these systems. So let's go ahead and take a closer look. As we transition to slide two, um, we'll go over a brief overview of what we'll talk about in this presentation. In this presentation, we will explore chapters 14 and 16 from the Understanding the Times, and applying them to biblical law and economics. We're going to look at at worldview contrasts, biblical principles, and real world applications from places like Myanmar and Thailand and Southeast Asia, and how they also can um, be juxtaposed onto a global scale. Uh, Pardon me, I'm getting over laryngitis. Um, my thesis is God's justice and provision form the biblical foundation for law and economics. This vision counters the world's and its broken systems with God's heart for covenant, stewardship, peace, and relationship. Transitioning, uh, slide four, we're diving into the law. Law isn't neutral. Every legal system reflects a belief about truth, about power, and human nature, particularly culturally, right? We have these greater laws of don't murder and don't steal, but in places like China and Myanmar or Egypt, you have to appear a certain way. There are things you cannot say. There are names you cannot utter without legal ramifications. In the Christian worldview, law flows from God's heart and his holiness and his desire to form a people into people who reflect his justice, who reflect his mercy, who reflect his values onto society. In a lot of ways, the Christian worldview, the biblical worldview, actually demands more from us to live more submitted lives um, than than earthly law does. Um, Moving on, a summary in chapter 14 compares multiple worldviews. The Christian law is seen is seen being rooted in divine revelation. Secularism reduces it to human consensus, and Marxism uses it as an economic leverage, which is at the end of the day dominating people. And postmodernism denies any universal truth. And the biblical worldview insists that law is moral it is absolute, and it is given in love, and that it is something that is written on people's hearts way the law is written on people's hearts, and you don't need to read "Don't murder" to know that murder is wrong or not to steal. Of course, there are cultural instances where there are things that are completely twisted, and things like being deceitful is actually a societal value. Um, but I digress. And evaluating the law, moving on to slide 6, um, scripture supports this truth that it is moral, absolute, and given in love. In Exodus 20, God speaks law to form an identity over a people that were slaves, that had no uh, that had no cultural grounding and needed to become a nation. God speaks law to form identity, not to control their behavior, but to form a nation, to form a people that are going to be ambassadors of Him and be the womb of the incarnated Christ. Um, Micah 6:8 calls us to do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly before our God. And Romans 13, a scripture that um, has given me a lot of peace as someone who did a deployment in 2012 to Afghanistan. Um, Romans 13 reminds us that authority comes from God, and that those who bear the sword justly do not bear it in vain. Um, However, we see places like Myanmar and China and Afghanistan, where in Southeast Asia, places like Malaysia, Indonesia, um, where human law actually struggles to uphold justice, barring, shunning these divine anchors, um, committing, all the way to genocide and human rights violations, that are imposed at a worldly standard. um, how much more wicked um, are places like this. um, Transitioning into economics in slide 7, uh, the world sees it as numbers and systems, a way of competing against other people, and defining who is in control and who can say what when and to who, and who can't say things. Um, the world sees this being a scale, in its own scale, not just law, but its own scale of economics. However, biblically, it's about how we relate to Yahweh, how we relate to creation, how we relate to each other. Um, who owns what? What is enough? These are actually these are spiritual questions that we have to wrestle with. Um, and moving on to slide 8, chapter 16 shows the Christian worldview in regard to economics, that God is the owner. At the end of the day, He is the owner. He is the creator of the cosmos, and He holds the universe in the palm of His hand. And we are stewards of the land that we have been given. We are called to be generous and to not envy or be greedy. Secularism, uh, Secularism prioritizes materialism and want, and Marxism enforces the control of assets and resources and food and people at the end of the day. And Islam gives, but often from obligation and piety and a need to to perform, while Scripture, while Jesus offers a vision of abundance governed by internal righteousness imputed by the Spirit of the living God. In evaluation, in Deuteronomy 8, this is in slide 9 if we're following along. In Deuteronomy 8, God reminds Israel he gives the power to get wealth. In Proverbs 11, he warns against dishonest gain. And in Acts 2, he reveals an early church marked by radical generosity. Today, places like Myanmar and Thailand need economic systems shaped by integrity and compassion, not exploitation. In conclusion, thank you. For one, thank you um, for listening to me today and my crazy voice. Um, in conclusion, law and economics are not just political issues, they are spiritual realities grounded in the heart of Yahweh. It is a mystery to be revealed in Him. And as someone studying the Bible, studying scriptures, seeking to read the scriptures to find the person of Jesus, I'm committed to digging deep and to search and to go más profundo, deeper into the living word and living out by his spirit, his justice, and teaching others how to walk in the peace, in the shalom through every system and arena of life. Thank you. The last slide is references, and I bless you.